Good afternoon, listeners. And do we have a treat for you today? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for dialing into this week's podcast. And I'm delighted to introduce our special guest, who I know is going to tell you all about her and her fantastic business. And it's one that I think you're going to really, well, in fact, I don't think, I know everyone is going to really, really enjoy because it's incredibly different and really, really interesting. So you have dialed into this podcast, whether you're on Spotify, thank you, whether you're on YouTube, thank you again. And we are focusing today on the title, which is Racism Isn't Always Loud. The hidden bias shaping your school or multi-academy trust's culture. So that title again, ladies and gentlemen, is Racism Isn't Always Loud, the hidden bias shaping your school or multi-academy trust. And I'm delighted to enjoy the star of our podcast this afternoon. Good afternoon, Helena, and how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm really, really good. Thank you again for joining us today for such an
Wonderful.
interesting and, would you say, sensitive topic?
Yes, very sensitive. It tends to be the one that is left out of the conversation often,
Mm,
or at least is skimmed over
yeah,
enough to tick boxes.
yeah,
But yes, sensitive, bit itchy, bit
yeah,
uncomfortable, but
yeah.
that's what I'm here for. So.
And I like the sound of all of those things. It makes the ingredients for a fabulous podcast. What I normally do is ask you to talk about your organization at the end of the podcast, but not today,
Oh,
because
okay.
I know that our listeners would love, as a scene setter, to learn about what you do on a day to day, minute by minute, month by month basis, helping and supporting schools. So just give us a couple of minutes, set the scene. What does your organization do?
Okay, so I run a CIC called YOUbuntu. The word actually Ubuntu has kind of been, it's a play on the word Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. It's roughly translated. It's the South African humanist philosophy, which is encouraging us to understand that the way that we might behave or the things that we do can have a ripple effect on the people and the world and our environment. And so that's why it fits quite nicely with what I do. So I work with schools, organizations, charities, you name it. And it's always focused in creating a safe space to discuss racism, and diversity, but really sort of not the, like I mentioned earlier, sort of the skim over the top of. It's kind
Yeah,
of getting gritty and having
yeah,
those uncomfortable conversations, but in a very safe space where it's not about catching people out. It's about learning. There's no
yeah,
silly questions because a question means you want to learn. And if you want to learn, it means you want to be less ignorant than you were before you asked
yeah,
that question.
yeah.
So it's always I mean, I've always worked in education, sort of 20 odd years as a dance teacher, and teaching dances of Black origin. So all of my classes would end up being a bit of a Black history lesson by accident. And I would frequently be brought in by schools to do a Black History Month dance program or something with the young people. And so I've just sort of stepped over into doing the anti-racism and racial literacy side of things, because I always see, wherever I go, I always see that it's something that needs to be addressed and there's
Yeah.
something missing in that. And I think it is those safe conversations.
It's really interesting. And listeners, I promised you something special today, didn't I? I promised you. I promised you. That's brilliant. Thank you. And I think it was really important today. As I said, we don't normally always do this, but I think it's important right at the beginning to set those themes. I think it's really important today. Let's dive into the first, let's call it structured question today.
Okay.
Is the challenge that schools and multi-academy trusts have in regards to today's title, of course. So we're talking racism, we're talking about, hidden bias, we're talking about the keyword culture here.
Mm,
So there are
mm.
lots of ingredients going on. So what is the challenge that schools experience, that you see, that they tell you, that they discuss with you via email and call? What does that look like?
The the challenge will always be one set of experiences, and then actually after I've been able to visit and chat with staff or the kids, it turns into something else because there becomes this sort of light bulb moment where many schools that I visit kind of go, oh, so we haven't been actually addressing the problem, right? So often what can happen is that racism, especially nowadays, I think, or over some recent years, it's not really loud. Certainly not like it was when I was a young person going to school. And it can then emerge into very subtle, normalized patterns. Um, and schools always have the best of intentions, right? They really want to go from being, okay, we're just ticking boxes to we want to make sure that our all of our young people feel safe, welcome, accepted, wanted, cared for, and that nobody feels singled out at any point. And of course, the way to do that is policies. First of all, the way to do that is policies. But kids don't feel policies,
Yes.
they feel culture. So it's how you're pulling those policies into every single corner of every classroom, of every toilet cubicle, even because things happen in the toilets. If kids can sometimes feel unsafe if they're going into the toilet for if there's bullying going on, any kind of bullying. How are we making it okay for the young people who are subjected to racist language or abuse, how are you making them feel that they can safely report it?
Yeah.
Because it's not always that they don't feel that they can report it. It'll be two other things, right? It'll be, well, I don't want to report it because then the people that are giving me problems are going to give me more problems because they're going to
Yeah.
know I told them. And then the big one, which is the sort of realizing later on that I mentioned a little bit earlier, that a lot of schools kind of realize that they're experiencing, is that a lot of kids won't report racism because they don't feel that the teachers, who don't often reflect them, racially diverse, they don't feel that the teachers have the tools to be able to deal with it, or they'll get palmed off with a, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's really bad. I'm very sorry. Well, just stay away from, try not to engage with that person. And of course, that doesn't fix the problem. It just prolongs it, sweeps it under the carpet, and allows for it to come back out again. Um, and so a lot of staff do talk to me actually, and they say, well, who am I as a white middle-aged man or woman to tell a group of black kids you can't use the N-word in the corridor,
Mm,
even if it is to each other? And of course, those kids will turn around and go, yeah, we can. We're allowed to, right? But
mm,
that's where then things like policy fall down because there's not anything actually to support those teachers in that moment to say,
mm,
well, no, actually, what can I say back to that? So then
mm.
it becomes like, well, I don't want to say anything that
Yeah.
might hurt someone's feelings. And so then things get ignored. And many teachers as well have spoken to me and said, I really want to have more stuff, whatever that is, diverse, everything in my
Mm,
classroom. But I'm just worried I might say something wrong or I might put something up that could hurt someone's feelings or make somebody feel uncomfortable. The thing
mm.
is that kids are already feeling uncomfortable in many ways. And so addressing the confidence for staff and their ability to deal with these things will then, I feel, have a trickle down effect
Yeah, that's
of
interesting.
fixing
Yeah.
many of those problems. Yeah.
Incredibly complex. Incredibly complex. And of course, the great example that you used about the corridor and bathrooms, there's the whole online
Mm.
side of things. I've literally been looking at the
Yeah.
news in the last couple of hours and, talking about new restrictions and
Yeah.
requirements mandated on social media
Yeah.
providers, and rightly so. What are they doing? What can they do? Are there mechanisms to protect young children? Um,
Mm.
so there's the whole online side of things as well. And I think, it's as you said, it's so difficult and so complicated, and these things, head teacher, deputy head, dealing with situations, parents coming into school, contacting a school, this is happening online, or this has happened, as you said, in school, in a, it's extremely, extremely difficult, which I think ties us beautifully into the next question, actually, which is, what are schools, in your experience, trying to do themselves to, let's say, improve in this area? Let's say 5, 10% better, or 15, 20%, if we think about it as small improvement steps over a period of time. What are you seeing? What are you hearing that schools and MATs are trying to do themselves?
I think, first of all, I think it's really important to highlight that schools are trying, right? It's not
Mm.
something that goes completely unnoticed. And um, things like culture days. I love a culture day. I think it's
Yeah, I like the
great.
sound of that. Yeah.
But is it done properly?
Mm,
That's the other thing. So
mm,
if you have, for example, I was invited to a culture day because lucky me, I get invited to these sort of things, and we had kids kind of coming in their national dress, their cultural dress. There was a fashion show. They were allowed to bring in their own music and decide
mm,
what was played in the hall, and they got to vote on sort of foods and things that they wanted to have in the cafeteria. They even had like an evening group together with parents from the community who then brought their own homemade traditional foods for people to, whoever turned up could try them. And it was, it was really, really lovely. Then
yeah.
I've been to other schools where their idea of cultural food is sticking an Italian flag and a pizza on a Tuesday, which is pizza day anyway, and going,
Yeah.
yay,
Yeah. Guess
or
what?
having a
Yeah.
go at jollof rice and then every West African kid that's ever had jollof rice is like, this isn't jollof rice, it doesn't
Mm,
feel good to me, right? So are we doing it right? Are we then as well, the other thing that I see which can happen is the exclusion of
mm,
certain cultures
mm,
completely by accident, but
mm.
it will be kids that are English that go, well, why can't we just wear our football tops? Because they're not sure what other options they've got, right? So they'll be like, I want to wear my football tops. Um, and it's like, well, what other things are we talking about to have conversations with these kids of like, what actually makes you proud? I had a kid yesterday turn around to me and go, I'm proud of my culture because I love fish and chips. I'm like, fair enough. What can I say to that? I love fish and chips too. So I think things like culture days are really good, but often they can be more performative than helpful, and they can often make kids feel like, oh, well, yeah, culture day.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I've tried to include in schools is the opportunity for kids of color to come together at a lunchtime club or an after school club to discuss their experiences, talk about what's happening, how they feel, why they feel that way, and then build their confidence and their ability to kind of articulate when incidents of racism might pop up, because often it can turn into violence, which we don't want. And
Yeah.
the only reason why it goes there is because kids aren't given the way to articulate themselves to be able to express what it is that they're not happy with. It comes out that way. But I think that of course, we're seeing things in policies and procedures, which is awesome. I'm seeing more of the sanctioning that might be given for incidents of racist behavior or bullying is higher than regular bullying.
Mm,
And that's definitely something that schools, at least some that I've visited, are taking on board. And spending more time celebrating the culture of the kids that are in that school all across the year rather than just on the specific dates,
mm.
right? So not just waiting until Black History Month to put up a
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter poster
Yeah.
or a Martin
Yeah.
Luther King picture or whatever. Not waiting until Diwali to ask for young people about what their experiences are with these cultural experiences and celebrations. You know, so I think schools are trying. I don't. Did I answer that question?
I think you did.
Did I? Did I
I've
answer
got,
that question?
I think you did it really well. And I've got a sub question to that question,
Oh gosh.
which is, and I wanted to ask this prior to coming in actually.
Sure.
What are schools and mats, if anything? This isn't necessarily a something that they're doing, but this is my question.
Yeah.
What are schools and mats trying to do to educate parents and guardians, if anything? Because obviously, one of the things that I believe strongly in, and from my own upbringing, is
Yeah.
you listen to your parents a lot. You follow what a lot of what they think, and certainly at the young age, of course, a lot of what is in me, I'm sure,
Mm.
has been ingrained in me from my parents. What about that?
Mm.
What are schools and mats doing, if anything, or enough to educate parents, please?
Yeah. So in my experience, and it's only my experience, the answer to that is nothing.
Mm,
Because I think often schools can feel somewhat not so much powerless when it comes to parents, but that, well, we need to, there's already so much that needs to be done to focus on the kids, right? And that's the school's concern. It's not really
mm,
the parents, although of course the parents are part of the, the community, the school community and everything, and obviously part of those kids. But it's um it's not something that I see much of.
mm,
I've had conversations with schools where certain children may be involved in racist incidents as being the aggressors frequently. They may have discovered that actually we found out that parents or home life, that's how they talk at home.
mm.
And so anytime there's been an opportunity to try and have a conversation, those particular parents are not interested in having a conversation already.
I see.
And so I think that that's where the work that I do with Ubuntu can be really helpful because I work with small groups of young people that are involved in these incidents regularly and be able to talk to them in a small space. And if I can change two minds
Yeah,
and maybe two of those kids go home and in 6 months' time they go, no, actually, Uncle John, you can't say that. That's actually really bad. You can't say that.
yeah,
Then we're having progress towards
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Um, I think otherwise the on the positive side, I think with that particular school that did the culture day and asked for parents to come in with their traditional food and mingle together and feel that sort of sense of glue and community, that was incredibly positive.
yeah,
And it certainly put it lifted the spirits of parents from those backgrounds in the way that they were more interested in joining the friends of the school community or the fundraising
yeah,
community, or if school needs help with something they're more likely to want to be involved.
mm,
And I think that that is something that certainly could be taken on board by every school.
yeah.
Absolutely. Mm.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask that. You could tell I was, that's been on my
Yeah.
mind preparing for today, and I think the last main question, I think the last structured question today is, and we've covered the great work that you do, but I'm going to frame this question differently.
Okay.
There will be the school and mat leaders right now listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
There's going to be hundreds listening to it over the next 2 to 4 weeks once it's listening. And there will be so many thinking to themselves, well, I want my school to optimize and improve.
Mm.
As you said, whether it's 1%, step by step, 5%, 20%, a huge change, whatever that may
Mm.
be. But they want their school to be more aware. They want the culture to be, you know, incredibly suitable for everybody. Inclusive was the word
Yeah.
that you used.
Yeah.
And they're looking for help and support. How does that work with you? So how would you work with a school to help them improve by 5, 10, 20% over a period of time in a variety of ways? What does that look like, please?
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. So So first of all, it's a bit of a discovery meeting,
Mm,
if you like. And often I will say one of the things that's a really, really good idea is that I come in and do a whole school, see the whole school all in one go, even if the plan is for me to just work with year seven who are showing to be the most problematic in this area, for example. I will always ask, let me see the whole school because when they then see me walking the corridors, because I will stop and I will talk always. I will talk to kids. I'll be like, come and see me. I'll hang around at break time. I'll sit in the atrium or whatever, and I'll always be there to talk to them. So if they see me at the front of assembly, and then throughout the next academic year or so, they're seeing me in the corridors, that they then know why I'm there, and they already know that there's somebody who gets it because they've experienced it and will listen to them and will understand and will do their absolute best to make sure it's dealt with, however that might be. It might be that I need to meet with SLTs to kind of say, look, what can we put together to make sure this doesn't happen again? Um, and it's the first and foremost always is about developing racial literacy, not as something that is just reactive
mm,
or, oh, I want to be more aware, but actually developing it as a skill. Because I always say that you don't know what you don't know. Okay. Everything that I do is nobody's judged by what they do or don't know or what they say or ask or whatever. Um, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't understand the incredible number of ways that racism can present itself. It's not always loud. It can often be very, very subtle. We know that microaggressions are a thing, but we know that they're small. And we also need to know how do we respond to them, even though they may seem small enough that it's not worth taking on board, right? Um, so you can't deal with a situation until you know how to recognize the bias immediately and how to respond to it in that moment. Otherwise, then we're looking at a situation where kids are going to withdraw, become silent, they're not going to report, and then, you're then stood there as a head teacher or whatever, kind of going, well, I want to do something about it, but I can't because no one's telling me what the problem is,
yeah.
but it's not always the telling of the problem. I was in a class yesterday and something was said, and I immediately saw the shift in the room to the right of me. And I saw it immediately because I'm heightened to that. So I knew
Mm,
how to deal with it. I knew how to ask questions. I knew who to pull back afterwards to kind of go, what's going on? Can I help you out? What's the deal?
mm,
Um, another thing would be making sure that we have student-led initiatives like EDI committees, because you will always have the kids that just don't care enough to mask what they're going to say. They will just come out with it and tell you.
mm,
And those are often really, really invaluable because for the 100 kids that maybe don't report an incident, some of the kids that are in the EDI committee are friends with them and will tell you, right?
mm,
So having something like that. But of course, with the sort of work that I do, I'll go in and I'll do assemblies. First of all, like I said, I will have 6-week programs where I can meet with the same group of kids over a 6-week period. Full day things, if you want to be around me the whole day, then I can make that happen. And then like I said, those sort of small groups with the young people that are frequently involved in things to kind of give them a bit of a polite verbal kick up the backside,
yes.
and
Yeah.
showing them, look, this sort of thing is not acceptable.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why a lot of it is so valuable, and as well with my staff workshops, the staff training, is because I talk a lot about my personal experiences. Because
Mm,
it's all good somebody coming along and teaching you or telling you or helping you to learn how to understand this, that, and the other and how to potentially tick a box. But when you have a real human in front of you that has experienced some really horrendous stuff,
mm,
you can feel very differently about that in the moment. You can go on TikTok and see things and be like, wow, that's terrible.
mm,
Scroll to the next thing. But when you're there with
mm,
a human, and I always invite people to just ask me questions. I never am offended. can never be offended. And
Mm.
so I'm always, really open to, contacting me, dropping me an email, discovery call. Let's have a chat about what's going on and how I can bespoke put something together to help your school.
Yeah,
That is what it's all about.
thank you. And I think a couple of key things there that stood out to me was you've got that proactive and you've got the reactive. And for
Yes.
school and mat leaders that are looking to, let's call it optimize that
Mm,
proactive, then it
yes,
could be a
absolutely.
great, get in touch with Helena, have the
Yeah.
conversation, design a path to optimize and improve. But of course, if you have an issue and you're wanting guidance, help, support, an intervention of some kind, again, you're in great hands with Helena here today. So we'd love to just wrap up. How can school and mat leaders get in touch with you?
Yes, so you are welcome to drop me an email. My email address is hello@youbuntu, which is YOUbuntu.UK. So that is my email address. More than welcome to drop me an email. If you want to find me on any socials, it's at youbuntu.uk. And of course, you'll find me, Helena Boyce, on LinkedIn. My picture looks like this.
Oh,
So
lovely.
yeah,
Like
do
mine,
notice
like mine
me.
too.
But yeah, I always encourage people to just. There's no shame in it. Like I said,
Yeah.
that you don't know what you don't know, and so I'm all for helping to unravel that. That the reason why I even started doing what I do with Ubuntu is because my children, who are now 18 and 20, were experiencing situations at school that I had experienced 30 years prior.
That's
And
it.
it didn't sit right with me that there has been no change where there needs to be change.
Mm.
So I, as a parent, as a mixed race black woman, a parent of black children, somebody with lived experience, I think that allowing people to just sit without judgment and pick my brain, if that is going to help make your school better, pick away.
Well said. And I'm sure there are lots of people that are listening to this that will do exactly that. Thank you very much indeed for being this week's special guest. Listeners, we hope you found it incredibly interesting. I certainly have. I've learned a lot. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Wishing everyone a great rest of the week and weekend. Helena, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having
And
me.
just show me one more time that LinkedIn picture. Was it like that?
Wait,
That one. That's the one.
wait, no,
Ladies and
not the
gentlemen,
face.
that's the one. That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. Great stuff.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. All
The
right.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye bye.